speaking itself does not develop your language competence. I think we need to make that distinction very clear. Speaking activity is not my enemy. It is not. Don't think that I don't like speaking. I enjoy speaking. But we need to be very clear about the role of speaking in the whole learning process. I don't think speaking causes your improvement in language ability. Speaking is the result, not the cause. Now, why do we believe that speaking is the cause? Why do we think that that assumption is correct? You have heard about this great person from Canada, Meryl Swing. Yeah? Meryl Swing is famous for her output hypothesis. I have no objection against the output hypothesis. The reasoning behind the output hypothesis is we need to give students opportunity to try out the language that they have just learned in the classroom. Good idea. You need to push your students a little bit, otherwise they won't be able to notice that there are some gaps in their linguistic knowledge. That's fine. I have no argument. Yeah? In other words, by speaking, you are forcing, you are asking students to notice certain language issues that your students may still need to learn. One thing that we're not very discerning is this. Meryl Swing talks about her students in Canada, and that is ESL. It's even more than ESL. It's an immersion program. Immersion dari kecil itu mendengarkan bahasa Prancis. Swing is not talking about English but about French. Immersion program in Canada. And she is talking about students who are pretty high up in their proficiency level. That makes a lot of sense to me, but not in Indonesia, where the student's proficiency level is still way below what is known as the functional level. Yeah? So for us, I think we are giving too much speaking practice and too early too. We are giving a lot more emphasis on fluency over accuracy. I think we need to have a balanced approach. There should be a lot of accuracy and fluency activities in the receptive skills before you get your students to produce language. Does it mean that we should ban speaking in the classroom? No, I don't think so. That's not the way to go. Some students will naturally want to use the language that they have seen from what they have heard or from what they have read. If they want to produce, fine. If they don't, that's fine too. Let me tell you a story. I remember my daughter when she was in kindergarten. When we first moved to Singapore, my daughter spoke Bahasa Indonesia and a little bit of Bahasa Jawa. And then she got involved in the kindergarten, in which the language of instruction was Mandarin, Bahasa Chinese. Yeah. First week, she didn't understand anything. But she's okay, she's fine, she's happy. 1 month later, she was beginning to enjoy because she began to understand what the teacher is saying to her. She was having a great time. She would come home, she would say words in Chinese that she did not really understand. She would start humming tunes in Mandarin. Month number 3, disaster struck. The teacher began to notice that my daughter had not produced a single Mandarin word in class. So she spoke to my daughter, I think you should take part more actively in class. It's good for you. She just smiled. She did not say anything. She went home the next day, next morning she said, I'm not going to class today. Why? I had a stomachache. She was just not ready to say anything yet. Now what happens if you force your students to produce? This is what happens. It's a bit sad. Year 4 student producing this sentence in my Facebook group. I think I should introduce my Facebook group. It's got 4,000 members now. See, those people who say yeah are members of the group. Members are teachers from everywhere, from Indonesia, from other places. This is not good. I think you're forcing the students to either that, you're forcing the students to produce language when she's not ready, or she has not done a lot of things that must happen before she is able to produce a good language. From an affective point of view, talking actually is the highest anxiety-causing activity. Very frightening. Very frightening. And the worst is speaking in front of a class. I'm not the only person who said this. I'm going to cite my esteemed colleague from the US. Here you go. Just came out 2013. Jerry is over there. Professor Jerry Gephardt. This is what he said in one of his research papers. Very good research paper. It's freely downloadable. Yeah, Jerry? Free, right? You can download this article for free. He talks about a Japanese postgraduate student in the US, and this is what the Japanese student said. I mean, she knew a lot of language, but she was not just accustomed to the culture of talking and interacting and asking questions in the classroom. Even thinking about a question made me nervous. So Bapak Ibu sekalian, don't force your students. They learn a lot by listening and by reading. They will talk, they will speak in due time. Well, of course, in your heart you will ask me, when? Maybe 10 years later, maybe 10 years. This is a classic belief. I know a lot of teachers often do not have a choice. You simply have to do this in the classroom. But what I've learned from many years of being in the business of language teachers and language teacher education is that explicit rules of grammar should not be taught. If you want to teach grammar rules, yes you can, but only a small number of grammar rules. Not too much. There are two ways of learning grammar. Number one is through what is known as explicit means. The other one is through implicit. I'm going to go through this very quickly. Explicit grammar, yeah? The assumptions behind this is something like this. Well, there are grammar rules out there. Ada berapa tenses ya, di bahasa Inggris ya, ada berapa ya? Tenses? 16, saya malah nggak tahu apa 16 tenses in English. Wow, that's a lot. And these rules are teachable. That's another assumption. Number three, these rules make sense to the learners. That is your assumption as well. Let me tell you very clearly, these rules do not make sense at all to your students. Tidak sama sekali. I've gone through the process. I've spoken to many students. These rules do not make sense to them. And I've spoken, this is important, I've spoken to some of the most successful learners of English in Indonesia. Gak banyak ya jumlahnya, but these are people who are really good, really fluent in English. None of them, tidak satu pun mengatakan bahwa I understand the grammar rules that my teachers taught me before. Tidak ada. Tidak ada. But as I said, maybe we find ourselves in a situation where we have to teach grammar explicitly in the classroom. Looks like we have no choice, but we simply have to do it. Plus, another thing is, grammar is easy to teach. Easy in the sense that, hey, today I have covered the simple present tense. You can report to your boss, you can report to your implicit notion of learning grammar. Number one, yes, there are grammar rules out there. That's true. Number two, these rules should be acquired through meaningful exposure. Jadi nggak sengaja begitu loh. Because you have heard enough language, you have seen enough language, you sort of develop some implicit, some intuitive understanding of the rules of the language without you being able to explain what the rules are. So that is implicit. This is my position, very clear. Grammar should be learned explicitly most of the time. Some teaching of grammar can be useful. Okay. One more and then we're done. Belief number 6 is this. This is another of my favorite belief in English language teaching. Strategy instruction is key to success. Myth or fact? No answer. I'll tell you it's a myth. I think it's a big myth. You can quarrel with me afterwards, but not here. After the session, you can quarrel with me, but my position is very clear. Strategy training or strategy instruction, it has a small role to play, but not much. Who are the people? I think you need the big players. You need to know the big players in strategy training. These are fine people. These are great people. I've met them personally when I was at ILC. The first one is John Rubin. Ini nggak serta kenal yang satunya. The other one is the queen mother in language learning strategy research. Namanya Rebecca Oxford. Everyone knows. Yeah, Miss Lee is a big fan of Rebecca Oxford. I like her. She's a fine lady and everything. But I think there's something that we need to be aware of. Yeah, we need to understand the limitations of strategies. This is what she said many years ago. John Rubin, 1975 or something, is one of the seminal, the very first paper written on language learning strategies. Ya, ada beberapa. Satu, GLL, Good Language Learner. GLL is Good Language Learner. Is a willing and accurate guesser. Artinya apa sih? Good Language Learner itu tukang nge-guess gitu. They like guessing, yeah? The GLL has a strong drive to communicate. They like communication. Remember, communication here happens in ESL, of course. In ESL, you have to use English. If you don't use English, you get into big trouble. You won't be able to order pizza, for example. You won't be able to buy food if you don't understand English. Next, GLL is willing to appear foolish. Foolish means you make mistakes, you don't feel bad. Can I ask you how many of you don't feel bad if you make mistakes in a language class? I felt very bad. I felt very bad. For one whole year, when I was a student doing my first degree in English language education, I did not say anything in class. Because I did not want to feel embarrassed. I was 20, I'm not going to tell you how. I was 20 plus years old. I was an adult. I was a legitimate adult. And I didn't want to look like a fool in the classroom. So I kept quiet for the whole year. Was it bad? Not to me. Not to me. And GLL practices a lot. I agree. That one I like. Although I have some addendum to add to that. And GLL tends to form and mean that one is no issue. That one is good. But if you look at the literature, professional literature, very carefully, you will understand what I mean. People started talking about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of strategies. You don't even know what is not a strategy. Bahkan masuk kelas itu adalah strategi. Hadir dalam kelas itu strategi, katanya begitu. Belajar grammar is also a strategy. Oh, come on. You know, if you want to learn a language, you have to learn its grammar first. And using a dictionary is a strategy. Yes, it is a strategy. When I was a student, it was not a strategy. The teacher just said, you must buy a dictionary and I can buy it. That's all. Learning strategies has been around for how many years? About 20, 25 years. And up to now, I have seen only two empirical studies that show that learners who were given strategies were learning a bit more listening compared to learners who were not given strategies. but the difference actually is quite small. And both were done in French as a foreign language. I have not seen anything done in English language learning context. Yeah? And one of the strategies that is very well known in the world, in Indonesia as well, is known as the context clues strategies. If you teach your students to identify contextual clues available in the language, usually in the reading passage and things like that, you will be able to help your students to guess the meaning of the words with a high degree of accuracy. Is that a fact or fiction? It's a fiction, thank you. Let's give it a try. Let's give it a try, yeah? Number one. The target word here is grof, G-R-O-F. If you have seen this, don't say anything. What is a grof?
Rock.
And then you have the word found in a context like this. The grof is an excellent swimmer, since it is an amphibian with smooth skin and has 4 legs. What is grof? Because I'm telling you, I'm describing the graph to you. So this is what we call contextual clues. Yes, it happens. Sometimes we are able to guess the word from the context available surrounding the word. But the 4 situations I've shown you are equally common in authentic texts. Let me go back. The first one is ND, known as non-directive. The context doesn't tell you anything. It's non-directive. Number 2, gen is general. Yes, you have a general idea of what grof is. It's a creature that can live in the water. And number 3, MD. This is interesting. In real situations, you often get to see MD. Guess what MD is? Guess. It's just one word. Please guess. You are not a good language learner. MD is misdirective. In other words, if you follow the direction very closely, if you make use of the clues, you will get lost basically. Yeah? So all these 4 contexts are equally common in real situations. Okay, there are many other myths that I can share with you. But what I'm trying to say actually is this. Number 1, we need to be more discerning. Yeah, we need to be a little bit more critical. I'm encouraging us to be critical. Us because we are very smart people and because we have a high degree of proficiency in the language. We need to be more discerning. Not all ideas are useful, and some are just based on unfounded hypothesis. These are things that we need to do. Always do this. Verify. Check if other people, other researchers, other specialists also have the